This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, global equity markets and, of course, the dollar were under some pressure today from all sides, as, of course, results from the U.S. presidential election proved far closer than the polls had predicted, potentially leaving the outcome in doubt for days or even weeks. Now, some investors are hedging against the risk of a drawn-out process as mail-in ballots were counted. Traders are saying it is a wait-and-see situation. On the continent, markets were pretty quiet today. In South Africa, there was little on the local corporate or economic calendar. Focus instead was on that U.S. election. The all share was up just over 1% today. Now, also coming up on today's show. It is a tight race for the U.S. presidency as both Donald Trump and Joe Biden claim victory. And it's only a matter of hours until the third China International Import Expo kicks off in Shanghai. And the South African government plans to clean up its transport industry. Well, let's start off tonight's bulletin with the U.S. election results. Now, the race is too close to call in several critical states. Here are exactly where things stand as of now. At the moment, the Associated Press reports that Democratic challenger Joe Biden is leading with 238 electoral votes. A candidate needs about 270 votes to win the presidency. President Donald Trump has 213 so far. Now, according to the AP tally, Biden has taken the lead in Wisconsin and Michigan. Georgia is tipping towards Trump. The outstanding ballots are mostly mail-in votes. And in the state of Pennsylvania, officials say they won't be finished counting until Friday. Now, still in the country, the average black family in the United States has about 1/10 the median wealth of the average white family. That is according to 2016 data from the Federal Reserve. Now, less wealth also means that black Americans are underrepresented in the market for financial products and services. Well, our correspondent Adiz Tiansan takes a look.
Georgette remembers when her father first started the family business nearly 4 decades ago.
We started the business with nothing, with no capital, no bank loans.
It has since become a local staple for generations. But instead of expanding, it had only downsized to this new location.
So 26 years later, we have a structural problem because the load was too heavy on the roof and it collapsed.
She did not qualify for any loans at the time. She had to choose between her house and her business.
It's pretty difficult. I mean, I've applied several places and been denied. So I made a very tough decision. You know, I ended up losing my home in order to save the business because there were so many lives connected. All of my employees are like family to me. You know, it was like pulling teeth with no anesthesia to just build it back up.
Financial services in the United States are mostly available to those who already have assets and years-long financial stability, as shown by their credit score. And that's why many people of color, especially living in areas like these, do not necessarily qualify for the loans they need in order to buy their first-time homes or start their small businesses.
First AIM Church of Los Angeles, the oldest African-American church in the city, has been trying to bridge this gap. Since the infamous 1992 riots in Los Angeles, Pastor Edgar Boyd has been working with local banks to create a microfinance program for people who do not meet average loan requirements.
We're economically 10% of the strength and the ability to encourage, to amass resources to help our own young people, our own young families to become entrepreneurs and to have access to capital, because it almost takes money to get money.
Although the black community has come a long way since the civil rights movement, Boyd says a lot more needs to be done to bridge the economic gap.
If we're only 1/10 of the economic strength of the average white family, it's going to take a whole lot more than a small amount. We've got to make sure that we put the monies and resources available and access to it for persons to be able to come in and begin progressively to narrow that gap.
Until that happens, Georgette continues to worry about survival in a gentrified neighborhood that keeps developing new businesses that are mostly white. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Meanwhile, an unsteady truce has settled in since President Trump launched a trade war with China 2 years ago. But of course, tensions still remain between the world's two largest economies, while Wang Guan looks at the impact that this has had on global trade.
China has hit remarkable milestones ever since they embarked on reform and opening up its economy more than 4 decades ago. As the dust subsided from the 2008 international financial crisis, China's GDP topped $6 trillion in 2010, surpassing neighboring Japan as the world's second largest economy and marking a new chapter in the history of global markets. This achievement, however, was still a far cry from the U.S. GDP, which was more than double China's at almost $15 trillion that same year. The U.S. has ranked first among all world economies for more than a century. China has steadily stepped on the gas over the past decade to catch up with the U.S. In 2019, China's GDP more than doubled compared to 10 years ago, hitting $14 trillion and accounting for a significant share of the global economy at over 16% from 9%. The U.S. economy did not remain stagnant in this same 10-year period. Its GDP accounted for nearly a quarter of the world in 2019, equivalent to the figures ranking 3rd to 9th. The weight these two economic juggernauts carry in world markets cannot be underestimated. In 2019, China and the United States maintained positive growth momentum. The two countries accounted for over 40% of the world's GDP, 1/5 of the world's export of goods and services, and a half of the world's top 500 enterprises. The enthusiasm with which the world welcomed the dawn of the 21st century was immediately tempered by the coronavirus pandemic. When this annus horribilis ends, China is the only major economy predicted by the International Monetary Fund set to record a positive growth rate, albeit lower than expected, of 1.9%. The United States economy is forecast to shrink by 4.3%. The rocky relationship between Beijing and Washington seemed to have gotten off on the right foot in 2020. With the signing on January the 15th of the landmark Phase 1 trade deal, in which China pledged to purchase $200 billion worth of American goods. But despite this, the U.S. stepped up its crackdown on China's strategic high-tech sector. In mid-February, the White House considered a proposal to stop General Electric from further supplying the C9Y9. A new passenger jet manufactured by the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China Limited with LEAP-1C turbine engines. The U.S. aviation sector has long been supportive of doing business with China for years, but GE said they only acquired the latest supply license from the U.S. government in April. On July 14, the UK followed the US by officially banning Chinese tech giant Huawei as a key supplier for its 5G networks. The Chinese company has been under fire from the Trump administration for years, with a new round of US restrictions kicking in September 2020. Amid a coronavirus that is not going away anytime soon, the United States and China should set aside their differences and work together to fashion a coordinated response. These two biggest economies will lose more than gain if they do not find a way back to a more productive relationship, one that allows for cooperation on global crises, even amidst intensifying bilateral competition and rivalry.
Now, of course, high stakes in this U.S. presidential election. Whoever wins will significantly impact the direction of global trade relations going forward. Well, let's get an update on those election results. Roy Rottenberg is in Washington with the latest. Rory, great to have you with us on the show today. Now, though Biden certainly seems to be ahead in the Electoral College right now, this election has been surprisingly too close to call. Give us the latest numbers coming out, and certainly which candidate do they favor?
Yeah, one of the reasons is that the way the map has actually moved overnight into the early morning. Originally, everybody was looking at Florida because it was an early state giving its results. The Biden camp was hoping to flip it blue, but they saw that they were underperforming in Miami-Dade County, and then so they gave up hope that they would likely win Florida, which they needed. Then we saw the Trump campaign hoping to flip states like Minnesota and New Hampshire. That didn't happen. Then slowly over the course of the evening, the map shifted west to Arizona, which was a surprise, and turned blue, largely because of the Latino vote there. It's unclear if that's a rejection of Donald Trump's policies on immigration or the economy or his handling of COVID-19. But once Arizona went into the Biden column, then a path for Joe Biden became very clear in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, which haven't been called yet because they're still waiting for the voting to be finished. But the votes that are outstanding in those places are votes that suggested would be for Joe Biden, areas that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama both did incredibly well there. There's no reason to suggest that Joe Biden would underperform in that comparison. And that has the Biden camp confident. It wants the votes to be counted. And the Trump campaign, understandably, uneasy. Both candidates spoke late on Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. Donald Trump wants the voting stopped, and it's evident why, even though the popular vote still shows that Joe Biden's leading. That's not important. But the Electoral College also shows Joe Biden leading, and I think that the margin in Joe Biden's favor will grow. Now, we might see some legal challenges in states and in Pennsylvania as that election becomes more clear, but it's unclear if any of these legal challenges will stop Joe Biden's inevitable path to 270, which is what he needs to be declared the 46th president.
Now, as you mentioned, Rory, Trump has threatened to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene. He has been alluding to voter fraud. And of course, he wants all vote counting to stop, as you mentioned. Does this have any bearing on the election at all? And if it does, how?
Well, you know, Trump has sort of set this up ahead of time. He was already questioning the integrity of the vote even before the election has started. So this goes with that narrative. But you know, you can't just go to the Supreme Court. It's not like a shop that you can just pop into. There are legal challenges. They need grounds, and that may happen. But it's unclear if the Supreme Court will take up cases with that unless they absolutely need to address those. We know that both sides have lawyered up. We expect Joe Biden to address the nation later today, and we can expect Donald Trump to continue sowing this sort of unrest. That may be part of a strategy to start off suggesting that any Biden presidency would be illegitimate to keep a momentum. Remember, Donald Trump is allowed 2 terms, so he could theoretically, even if he loses, run again in 2024. So he wants to keep his base. He wants to keep Trumpism alive. And part of that is giving a credence to that narrative that the vote is fraudulent.
Now, of course, it may be days before we know the results of this election. How much longer do you expect to wait? And in the meantime, how has this long, drawn-out process impacted markets in the U.S.?
Well, first of all, it depends what happens in Michigan and Wisconsin and also Nevada. Those states might seal the deal for Biden, as I mentioned. Interestingly, markets like certainty. This is uncertain, but it seems based on the numbers that we saw early in the morning, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, NASDAQ, all of those starting the day up, suggesting that they were preparing themselves for some sort of uncertain result and had sort of built that in. We saw oils were up. not necessarily because of the election, but because today officially the U.S. exited the Paris climate change agreement, climate accord. So a little bit of uncertainty which direction the markets were going. Donald Trump likes to tout markets as a reflection of his economy, but so far it seems that the markets were bracing for this uncertainty. It just depends how long that uncertainty lasts.
Well, we're certainly watching those numbers with you. Thank you so much for that update, Roy. That, of course, is Roy Rottenberg joining us there in Washington. Let's shift focus now and take a look at our corporate headlines today. Now, Access Bank, Nigeria's biggest bank, is accused of illegally blocking an account used to promote media coverage of protests against police brutality. Public affairs company Gatefield Nigeria has filed a case in a federal court in Abuja, accusing the bank of unilaterally restricting its account and demanding damages of $262,000. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry says the suspension of Ant Group's IPO is to protect capital market stability and to protect investor interests. China blocked the fintech giant's $37 billion listing on November 3rd, thwarting its debut in Hong Kong and Shanghai, scheduled for November 5th. This follows a meeting between China's financial regulators and Ant executives, who were told the company's online lending business could face tighter scrutiny. Meanwhile, BMW's third quarter profit rose almost 10% thanks to Chinese demand for luxury cars, but the German automaker has warned a new wave of coronavirus infections sweeping Europe and the United States poses considerable risk to its business. Now, sales of luxury models such as the 8 Series and X7 helped the car maker reach a new sales record in the quarter, but the cautious outlook sent BMW shares lower on Wednesday. And finally, gig economy giants, including Uber Technologies, Lyft, and DoorDash, are winning their effort to pass a hotly contested ballot measure. It will exempt the companies from a state law requiring them to classify most of their workers as employees. Now, drivers for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash will receive some new corporate perks, but won't be eligible for full employment benefits and protections as lawmakers intended. Uber and Lyft alone will save more than $100 million a year on employment costs. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. We are heading into a short break now, but still to come on the show. Libya's crude output hits 800,000 barrels a day. And Ghana loses a little over $140 million to cybercrime.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan.
Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's head to Libya now. The country's daily crude output has climbed to 800,000 barrels. And of course, it is now targeting 1.3 million barrels by early next year. Now, the reopening of the last of Libya's oil fields and ports has prompted a resurgence of the energy industry, with the OPEC nation's daily production jumping from less than 100,000 barrels in September. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
Reaping the rewards of peace and stability, 800,000 barrels daily production is an 8-fold increase since a ceasefire took hold over a month ago. According to the chairman of Libya's state-run National Oil Corporation, Mustafa Sanallah, the North African nation is targeting to pump 1 million barrels daily next month, before accelerating to over 1.6 million barrels daily by the end of 2021.
Libya's daily production reached 1.3 million barrels per day in 2018, and it could easily achieve over 1.5 million barrels on one condition. That's if peaceful negotiations and ceasefire continues. A military conflict will halt production, just like what happened throughout 2020, and this can further damage the economy.
Libya's current oil revenue exceeds $12 billion. Half of it is paid as salaries to state employees. About $2 billion goes to the rival Tobruk government in the east, and the rest to the National Accord government and the state budget. Officials, however, say the income is not enough to cover its budgetary needs or the state's expenses.
Unfortunately, one of the big mistakes of Muammar Gaddafi is that he made the country dependent only on oil revenue, yet it has a lot of potential in tourism, for example. Also, Libya oversees 2,000 kilometers of seashore. This could create a huge fishing industry that could garner billions for the country. Good use of its seaports could make it a regional trading hub in North Africa like Egypt. There is a lot of revenue sources to create.
Analysts are hopeful that the political rivals will broker a permanent peace deal to allow more oil production. The country with the largest oil reserves in Africa will need the extra revenue to jumpstart its rebuilding process after a decade of internal fighting. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, infrastructure development will be key to South Africa's economic recovery. That is according to President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was speaking at the Infrastructure Preparation Roundtable in Midrand. He said there's a plan to unlock $60 billion for infrastructure development, and that the identified infrastructure projects will help to create jobs in the country. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela brings us the details.
South Africa is due to roll out a big infrastructure spending program and large-scale employment stimulus to revive the economy. The country will be embarking on this under the auspices of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. The plan outlines an aggressive infrastructure program and far-reaching reforms to increase competitiveness and inclusiveness. It also includes measures to catalyze industrialization, relief for vulnerable households and individuals, and a public investment in employment programs.
The infrastructure investment plan not only speaks to new infrastructure, but also to maintenance and repairs of existing infrastructure, as well as urban management, the cleaning of our towns and cities and rural areas. This project pipeline also very importantly addresses social, economic, spatial, and environmental injustices of the past.
This plan, which is underpinned by the agreements between social partners, outlines key interventions to kickstart the country's economy. Among other things, the plan will prioritize economic reforms to unlock investment and growth, to fight corruption and crime, improve the capability of the state, and create jobs through mass public employment programs.
We are also committed to creating an enabling environment by doing what is essential, what the investment community would like to see, in doing things such as fighting corruption and fighting crime. We have to do this if we intend also to industrialize our country, and in doing so, to also create an enabling environment for the growth of small, medium enterprises.
Government has already identified almost 300 projects with a total investment value of at least 1 trillion rand or 60 billion US dollars. The projects were chosen because of their multiplier effect and job elasticity.
The projects are in the areas of water and sanitation, energy, transport, digital infrastructure, agriculture and agro-processing, and human settlements. And each of these areas is vital for the rejuvenation of our economy, reducing the costs of doing business, and improving our country's competitiveness.
South Africa's economy remains in tatters. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened its situation. The Infrastructure Development Plan is one of the key interventions being made by government to revive the economy. Yodison Jamila for CGTN in Midrand, South Africa.
Now, in South Sudan, more than 20,000 villagers in the country's western Equatoria state have flocked into schools, health centers and humanitarian compounds in Mundri town. That's after they were forced from their homes by rising flood waters. The worst rains in living memory have displaced nearly 370,000 South Sudanese since July this year. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has the details.
Hundreds of thousands of South Sudanese farmers are staring hunger in the face after the worst rains in living memory inundated their fields. Alexandra Karama is one of them. Her small holding is located outside the western town of Mundri, one of the worst affected areas.
My house collapsed. My groundnuts have all been swept by the water. My farmland is still underwater. You can go and see it. Nothing is left. No sorghum, no groundnuts, nothing.
Karama and others like her have been forced to seek shelter at a UN compound. Like much of East Africa, South Sudan has received unusually prolonged torrential rains over the last year. The United Nations estimates the flooding has displaced more than 600,000 people, equivalent to more than 1 in 20 of the population.
The number of people affected by the flood is about 22,000 people in both the Mundri West and East. And the critical needs really is more in terms of shelter, food, health services, access to health services, and wash.
Now, with the worst of the rains gone, aid agencies are rushing to distribute seeds for replanting to avert a famine.
We have also witnessed the food distribution that had happened. We had also visited the medical facility, and we have also visited the distributions of seeds and crops in order so that people could be able to cultivate back, despite the fact that many of the crops has already been destroyed.
In Mundri alone, about 22,000 people have been affected by the floods and are in urgent need of food, shelter, and healthcare. The United Nations is distributing supplies, but roads to the area have been rendered impassable, complicating faster intervention. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And in Ghana, data from the National Cybersecurity Center shows that the country lost a total of $114.8 million to cybercrime in 2018 and 2019. Now, Isaac Mensah, a member of the Computer Emergency Response Team of the Security Center, called on the media to support the efforts being adopted to end the vice. The government arm is also undertaking a nationwide media training and awareness program, which is themed A Safer Digital Ghana. It is aimed at protecting digital systems in the country. Well, let's now shift gears to Nigeria, where talks have resumed yet again to introduce a bill that will regulate social media in the country. The move comes barely weeks after thousands of Nigerians mobilized nationwide protests through social media to condemn police brutality. While authorities say this is in the interest of national security, citizens and activists say it's an attempt to stifle freedom of speech. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
To do with social media. I want the technology to be able to shut down at will. Social media will become a menace to the country's security.
Nigeria's Information Minister, Lai Mohammed, pushing for the regulation of the nation's cyberspace. In the past weeks, protesters successfully launched their campaigns via social media. But authorities are saying that the platform is chiefly used to peddle fake news and other vices. Many young Nigerians, like blogger Kuyet Bamai, have been leveraging on the social media to have their voices heard. He believes the government can do the same.
But I know other countries where you see even the government engaging with these social media tools to use it for their own purposes and to have a better connection with the people. So I feel the same thing could apply here as well. I feel the government needs to see social media not as their enemy. I feel social media could be used as a tool, like I said earlier, to engage with the people.
This is not the first time the Nigerian government is considering cyber regulation. In March, civil rights organizations and citizens pushed back a bill that empowers government regulators to shut down cyberspace at will and death penalty for hate speech. Now some see it as an effort to silence citizens from holding the government accountable.
If government is talking about social media regulation at this point, what it means is that the government activities, or probably activities they don't want the population to hear, are being, for example, now made open through the social media. So one would say, why social media at this point in time? Is that the problem bedeviling us?
Nigeria has around 30 million social media users, many of whom find expression on the various platforms. The platform has been used to peddle fake news, cyberbullying, and other vices which government says could be fatal to national security. Attempts to regulate the cyberspace is still at the preliminary stage. It would have to scale through Parliament for deliberations and approval. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
You are watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, but still coming up on the show. It is only a matter of hours until the third China International Import Expo kicks off in Shanghai. And could Italy's espresso become the next UNESCO World Heritage? Find out after the short break.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours,
business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Well, let's turn our attention now to some international news. The third China International Import Expo will get underway in Shanghai on Thursday. President Xi Jinping has delivered remarks in the opening ceremony. He called on countries to cooperate in building an open, inclusive and balanced economy.
The pandemic reminds us that all countries are a community with a shared future, and no one can stand alone in the face of major crises. We must adhere to the concept of win-win cooperation, prioritize the common interests of all countries, and promote economic globalization in a more open, inclusive, balanced, and win-win way.
Now, President Xi also said that China will push for more reforms to open up its own economy. He said China will continue to improve its business environment and boost cooperation with other nations. This year's trade show runs until next Tuesday. Shanghai is gearing up to receive some 400,000 visitors, and around 4,000 companies from around the world have brought their products to the Chinese market. Now, organizers say stringent pandemic prevention and control measures will be observed throughout the event. Meanwhile, the UK is going big at this year's expo. The country's focus is on food and drink sectors that's being hammered by the pandemic, with even smaller British businesses now looking for opportunities further afield. CGTN's Guy Henderson reports.
The cliffs of Scotland's remote Orkney Island. A long way from China, and yet one small distillery here is now putting out adverts with Chinese subtitles. Orkney Spirits Limited is part of the British lineup at a major international trade conference taking place in China this week and looking to boost its profile.
We hope that as time goes on and as the category grows within China, we'll be there to be a small part of that growth within the Chinese market.
Alongside the biggest British brands such as Diageo, which owns everything from Johnny Walker to Pimm's, there are also a number of newer UK businesses attending this year's event, with the country's stand focusing on the food and drink industry. This is another one, a brewery in the northern English city of Sheffield, whose products' Chinese flavours go far beyond the branding.
We've taken Baijiu, this revered, amazing national drink of China, and managed to somehow blend that both in terms of flavour and culture with an amazing Western craft beer.
Baijiu Society's founder Craig Butler says in such a dauntingly massive market, for him, focus is key.
We picked very specific targets where we knew we would win. Hong Kong's very important for us because it's kind of our it's kind of our spiritual home. Sounds a bit corny, but it kind of is, because it's where we first showed the beer. It's where we have so many friends, and you know, we have investors that are based in Hong Kong that have invested heavily in the concept and the business.
Both say the pandemic has shifted their thinking because, well, look at the state of the market closer to home.
The UK hospitality industry has had an incredibly tough year to date, and it doesn't look as though the winter's going to be much easier. So some of those British companies that can access a Chinese market that's faced far less disruption spy a rare opportunity in this environment.
Right now, China's bouncing back economically, and UK food and drink exports to there carried on increasing slightly in the first half of this year, while in almost every other market they tanked. The China-Britain Business Council says the pandemic may have even made access simpler for smaller firms, in one respect at least.
The pivot to virtual trade missions has led to quite a significant increase in interest. I mean, ultimately, when trade shows and missions are physical, it's a lot more kind of hand-picked.
With Britain's hospitality sector heading over the precipice of another lockdown in England, perhaps one of the only major trade fairs that hasn't been cancelled might bring just some relief. Guy Henderson, CGTN, London.
And in Italy, producers of espresso coffee are campaigning to have the product recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage. A national consortium says its cultural and economic importance needs to be protected from foreign competition incorrectly using the espresso brand. Hermione Kitson reports from Pescara.
For the Saquella family, espresso is a way of life. But after 5 generations, their recipe for success remains a closely guarded secret.
There are a lot of secrets. If I tell all, there will not be any more secret. But first of all, obviously, there will be a blend, will be a roasting, will be also the correct use of all the machine and everything make a good espresso at the end.
Espresso is the Italian coffee, an art created in 1884, now embedded in everyday culture.
Espresso belongs to Italy. As well, Italy belongs to the espresso. It is rich not only of a flavor of a body, but is also flavor of a relationship, is a flavor of a communication.
This value beyond the cup is something Saquella knows well. It's part of a national consortium wanting espresso to be recognized by UNESCO as an intangible World Heritage product. They import from 20 different countries and say the perfect espresso is a complex science.
Each single origin, single country gives a different taste of the coffee. So you have to create a blend like a parfum so that you have a perfect, well-balanced coffee.
After the roasting phase, the coffee is stored up to 28 days, and in that time the natural oils are released to create the aroma, flavour and body.
During lockdown, it was one of the experiences Italians craved the most.
One of the most missing moment was really the espresso, and to share an espresso in a bar together with friends.
This month, the group launched a website to collect signatures and personal experiences.
Espresso coffee is not just of cultural importance. Economically, it also makes a significant contribution, generating around $4 billion for the local economy each year.
Producers say UNESCO recognition would help protect against foreign products wrongly using the espresso brand.
Also, this would be for us as a producer, as a category, as an industry, very important for us to keep and maintain this ownership on this kind of way of drink of coffee.
The consortium will formally present its case to UNESCO in November. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Pescara.
Now, it has been more than 3 months since Chinese cinemas reopened to the public, and while theatre occupancy rates remain capped at 75%, audiences are back. Box office earnings are now up to 56% of last year's level, and moviegoers and producers are looking forward to more. Here's Chen Tong taking a closer look.
Though it's a workday afternoon, there are plenty of people coming to this cinema in downtown Shanghai. Some have been here frequently, while some are here for the very first time.
I like to watch movies, and some movies you have to watch in a theater.
I brought my kids to watch movies during the summer holiday.
It's my first time in 3 months.
In October alone, China's box office earnings reached some 6.35 billion yuan. That comes to some 164 million tickets, the highest monthly number for any country in the world. Virus prevention controls are still strict at the cinemas. Temperature checks, health QR codes, and masks. But despite the improved performance China is showing, of course, the box office earnings have not fully recovered.
We are seeing bigger audiences on weekends, but it still depends on the movie quality and whether it's a holiday. The market is recovering, but has not recovered to the same level as last year because we are still controlling the occupancy rate according to the virus prevention requirements.
But the past 3 months have shown a good trend. So far this year, total box office earnings in China have reached some 15 billion yuan. And 8 movies, including Detective Chinatown 3 and The Rescue, which were scheduled to be aired during the Spring Festival this year, have announced plans to premiere during the Spring Festival next year.
If the pandemic remains under control, I think the box office earnings will continue to rise during the Spring Festival next year or during other hot showing seasons. Many movies scheduled to premiere this Spring Festival will need a year or two of advanced publicity yet. And during this period, there will be more new productions. All these will stabilize the supply side and the box office earnings.
Fiscal reports of the movie makers are also showing signs of recovery. In light media, Huace Media and Talent Television and Film have all reported either profit growth or narrowing deficits for the third quarter of this year. Chen Tong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices rising about 2%, and that's after industry data showed crude inventories in the U.S. fell sharply. However, trading has been pretty choppy today as the outcome of the U.S. presidential election did remain unclear. Meanwhile, gold falling today as we saw the dollar strengthen. That's after U.S. President Donald Trump did grab an early lead in the key state of Florida. That, of course, muddied the path for his Democratic rival, Joe Biden. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come on the show. The South African government plans to clean up its transport sector. And Egypt's Cairo Film Festival is postponed because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Administration, Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Now in South Africa, the government has backed a plan to regulate and empower the taxi industry. The sector is a key part of the country's transportation sector. Taxis move more than 16 million people a day. Well, according to President Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African government is trying to address the problem of inadequate public transport amid rising violence that has badly affected taxi operators in the country. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with more.
The vast majority of South Africans do not have access to private cars. This means that the provision of efficient, reliable, safe, and affordable public transport is critical to the people's everyday lives. The taxi industry is the lifeblood of this country's public transport system. Since the late 1970s, it has served South Africans by providing an accessible means of public transit in nearly every corner of the country. The vast majority of public transport commuters use taxis, followed by buses and trains. The industry is a major source of business creation with approximately 150,000 taxi business owners in operation, but it remains unregulated. And it's an industry that has often been beset with many challenges that have tarnished its reputation. These include taxi wars that affect the commuters. It's also an industry that often disregards the law.
Unity remains a challenge in the taxi industry, and achieving such unity will play a pivotal role in ensuring peace and a safe environment for commuters, drivers, and other road users.
Government and the taxi industry have now gathered to find ways to reform the sector. In a recently held gathering, various stakeholders agreed that the industry needs to be regulated and that government will appoint a task team to ensure the success of this task.
The task team that I'm going to set up will continue to negotiate on those particular issues we don't agree on. It's not like we come here with a gun to the taxi industry to agree on these issues. That's the first thing. So we are agreed now on this question of formalization in terms of how, and it's not like something that must happen after 10 years.
Minister Mbalula says the task team will see to the implementation of the resolutions and that a new and improved taxi industry will be here by April next year. While taxis remain the main mode of public transportation here in South Africa, over the past few years, government has introduced other efficient and reliable public transportation modes. Those include Gautrain and Rea Vaya buses. The Rea Vaya is a bus rapid transit system in Johannesburg and surrounding areas, while the Gautrain is a mass rapid transit railway system. It was constructed in an effort to address the heavy traffic problem in and around Johannesburg and capital Pretoria in Gauteng province. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And in Egypt, the Middle East's oldest film festival has been pushed to December. Organizers of the Cairo Film Festival had hoped that some anti-epidemic restrictions would have been eased by now to allow the event to proceed as planned. However, they were forced to change their plans due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as CGTN's Adele El Marhoui now reports.
The curtain call for the 42nd edition of the Cairo International Film Festival was scheduled for the 19th of November. To ensure that proper health procedures and COVID-19 hygiene measures are in place, organizers decided to postpone the festival by 2 weeks. They'll be consulting the WHO and the Egyptian Health Ministry about their infection control regulations.
It was definitely stressful because we have to work, assuming that the festival will take place, but knowing that any minute it can get cancelled. And then you have to make some difficult decisions as to when to really start committing large amounts of money, for production, for ticketing, for guests, for hospitality, for all those things.
Beside the screening of films, the festival will also be hosting the Cairo Industry Day and Film Connection workshops. Organizers will focus on bringing filmmakers together to discuss the hardships the pandemic has brought upon the cinema industry. Fears are growing that by the time the event begins on December 2, Egypt's COVID-19 second wave would be picking up. This has affected the festival's international guests list.
It's affecting our ability to attract some top talent, filmmakers, actors, people of all sorts that would have otherwise considered coming to Egypt, considered coming to the festival. But yes, it's affecting us, and it's going to be difficult. But really, we're going to try, because I think that people want to come. I mean, there really is an intention to come. It's just whether it's possible or not.
This year, the festival will be promoting gender equality and transparency through the selection of films.
Cairo International Film Festival is one of only 15 festivals worldwide registered as Category A events by the International Federation for Film Producers Association. It is the only festival in Africa and the Arab world on that list. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, before we leave you, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. We saw South Africa's rand weakening as much as 2% in mid-morning trading. It is on course to end a 3-day winning streak, and that's following in the footsteps of other emerging market currencies as a tight U.S. presidential election potentially leaves the outcome in doubt for days. Now, the rand has been in demand in recent days. It broke below the 16 rand per dollar level for the first time since March on a Tuesday, as of course investors better win by Democratic contender Joe Biden. That of course would ease political risks they're expecting. It will also take a freer approach to international trade, and he may put pressure on the dollar with a larger COVID-19 economic stimulus package. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.